Meanwhile, on the comic box. Bow, 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 to get down, to get a map, meow, 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 do comics. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Comic Box, part of the Geek to Geek podcast network. My name's Rob, your friendly neighborhood comic geek. Our topic for the week this week is going to be Doctor Strange, because this podcast is going to release at the same time as the film, here in the United States at least. It's already released overseas. I've been doing the special episodes, and I wanted to give you guys a primer episode, but first, let's talk weekly geekery. My weekly geekery this week is just Halloween. Halloween is the thing that happened. It is over now, and that makes me sad. I kind of feel like I peaked on the Halloween season early when I went down to the Circle of Ash haunted house down in Iowa to volunteer. I feel like maybe I should have held that off and done that the final weekend. I did have several movie nights, though, which was awesome. A couple late-night movie nights with friends watching horror films. But Halloween happened this past week. On Halloween, I didn't do anything particularly spooky. I went with Liam of the Comic Box podcast fame to a screening of Riff Tracks Live at one of the local theaters here, where it's the folks who used to do Mystery Science Theater 3000. Essentially, they show old, terrible movies, and then they heckle them. They were doing it live. We watched a rebroadcast of the live thing. It's one of those Fathom event shindigs, if you will. There were literally only two other people in the theater, and they didn't even bother dimming the lights. I don't know if that's normal for the Fathom event things, if it's supposed to be sort of a live event, but they never bothered dimming the lights. So the lights were on, and the other people were sitting somewhere in front because they're silly. I don't know when you have the entire theater to choose from why you would sit in like the front right corner, but basically, Liam and I were able to just hang out, and we heckled the film right along with them, probably far too loudly. Let's move on to some news, shall we? News. To start, you guys, I have to apologize to you. The last couple of weeks I've been doing all these sort of special episodes. Totally forgot to remind you guys about the Halloween Comic Fest. If you didn't go to your local comic book store and pick up Halloween-themed free comics, I know I talked about this several weeks ago when it was first announced and they threw up the video, but I don't expect you guys to be writing things down as I'm talking. So go to your local comic shop, see if there's anything left. There might still be some free comics that you can pick up. All right, let's get into some news. Marvel Television. Netflix has announced that pretty much everyone from Daredevil and Jessica Jones will be showing up in The Defenders. They've just slowly been confirming cast members and stuff like that. So we know that the characters of Jerry Hogarth and Trish Walker from Jessica Jones are going to be in there. Stick is going to be in there from Daredevil. You can go online and find lists as they continue releasing, but pretty much it sounds like everybody from everything is going to be in The Defenders. Like everybody is bringing their supporting cast with them. I mentioned this last week that I had some theories on the Logan trailer, so let's talk Marvel movies, guys. So in this Logan trailer, obviously it's pretty much confirmed as far as I'm aware that, yes, that is X-23, the girl who in the comic books is the female clone of Wolverine and is actually the current Wolverine in the comic books. They say in the trailer that the mutants are gone, but we know obviously there's at least Professor X and Logan, and then clearly it seems X-23 as well. And so we see that Logan is all scarred up. We see that his hands are bloody, and he's old, which is odd because we know that he's been alive for a very long time and has remained looking pretty young. So all of those things added up tell me that his healing factor is either gone or almost gone, and that the blood that's on his hands might be from him popping his claws, and then maybe it didn't heal or didn't heal correctly, and that's why he's all old and scarred up. So my guess is that either the mutants themselves are all gone, or that cure from X-Men 3, if you guys remember, is they found a cure for mutation, and Rogue takes it, I think, at the end of X-Men 3. Maybe that ended up getting dispersed enough where, almost all or all of the mutants either don't have their abilities anymore or they're extremely limited. And then X-23 is going to come along as either a clone of Wolverine or just the first mutant in a very long time. And so people are trying to hunt her down, and that's why Logan protects her, because she's so important. Otherwise, it's just a girl that's there, which, I mean, hooray for Wolverine. I'm going to protect somebody anyway. But my theory is it's got to be something along those lines. Maybe that sideways water tower, it kind of gave the Cerebro sort of feel, didn't it? So maybe Xavier has a little bit of power left as well, and he is constantly sending out a call in case there are any mutants, and maybe that's how they find X-23, or how she finds them. I don't know, those are my fan theories, but I want you guys to head over to the subreddit, which is reddit.com/r/geektogeekcast, and I want to talk about this. So I will try setting up a thread. If I don't, feel free to beat me to it. I want to go there and I want to talk about this because I want to know what you guys think, because it's such a cool trailer, and speculation is one of the most entertaining parts about being a geek, particularly a comic geek right now when all of these movies are coming out. Speaking of other Marvel movies, well, that's Fox, I guess, technically, with Logan. But anyway, Marvel movies. We've gotten a glimpse at Thor's new costume for Thor Ragnarok. Liam's the actor who plays Thor, posted a picture on Instagram of him holding a sign supporting the protesting of the Dakota oil pipeline. It shows him, he's wearing his new costume. There's a link in the show notes for you guys if you want to check it out. And on a personal note, his arms scare me. They are, like his biceps are scary big. Scary big, you guys. You guys. Scary big. Moving back over to Fox because I didn't order my notes correctly. Tim Miller, the director of Deadpool, has left the sequel, citing creative differences with Ryan Reynolds. I'm not quite sure what to think of that because I think he did a very good job with Deadpool. It was the first time he had directed a live-action feature-length film. He usually works in animation and stuff. We'll have to see what's going on. People are throwing around names like crazy of potential directors, who might do a better job or would do a good job. But it's always kind of sad to see the guy that helped the film find such success, led the film to such success, leaving over creative differences. So I don't know if that means good or bad things. But in general, we all trust Ryan Reynolds, right? Like, he was pivotal to getting the first one made in the first place, and obviously is the living embodiment of the character outside of the murder, as far as we know. A lot of directors leaving. Because over at The Flash as well, at DC, to make a little DC switch, The Flash has now lost its second director. So it sounds like things aren't going super great over there either. So hey, kids, if you're looking for a director gig and you like comic book movies, clearly there are a few open jobs. Sticking with DC movies, a new Wonder Woman trailer should be out about the same time as this episode. I am recording this early Thursday morning, so it's possible that when this episode releases that the new trailer will be out or will almost be out. So watch YouTube. That's really all it takes. Go to YouTube and what's their thing? DC Entertainment, Warner Brothers Pictures, something like that. Time to move on to reviews. We're going to start with that special one for Professor Beej, or should I say, just Beej. Champions number 2. This is a fun comic. It's reminding me very much of the old Young Justice comic still. This episode, I have this thing that I keep saying that I keep calling issues episodes. That's how it works in my brain, you guys, they're episodes in this ongoing story. In any case, this issue number 2, the champions go on a camping trip to learn each other's powers, ask questions of one another, get to know one another, and are introduced to Cyclops, who shows up wanting to join the team. There was a Young Justice comic that was actually very similar to this in the early issues of Young Justice. I think this is a good comic going forward. I'm still going to be tempted to, stay digital, go in trades, something with it. For now, I'm cool going along with it. It's just I'm so scared of my long boxes filling up with yet another series because I never go back to long boxes. I never go back and read my individual issues. Unworthy Thor, 1 of 5. This was a good introduction to this miniseries. Introduces the idea of Thor now calling himself the Odin son, so the former Thor, not the current female Thor, the Thor trying to get his hands on the ultimate Thor's hammer so he can be a Thor again, if that makes sense. It has more of a Thor God of Thunder feel. So for Void or anybody else who really liked God of Thunder, but hasn't really gotten into any of the Thor stuff after that. I am not going to tell you to go out and pick this up right now because it's a 1 of 5. It's a mini-series. But when the mini-series comes out, maybe, I would suggest going and checking this one out. Moon Knight number 8. I really hope this book starts making sense soon. Another thing I repeat every single month. Because otherwise, honestly, at the end of this arc, I'm gone. I love Moon Knight. I've read, I think, every Moon Knight, or almost every Moon Knight book. Maybe that's an exaggeration. I have 3 of those giant essentials, and then a book that came out in the early 2000s I picked up again, and I've read everything since then, and I'm sure I've missed some of the 90s stuff possibly in there. It's just, I can't keep dealing with the insanity. Like, it's interesting, but it's too much for too long. Maybe if I read it as a trade and got through the whole thing right away, but to be like, I wonder if this is the week we're going to figure it out. I wonder if this is the week we're going to figure it out, and we get nothing. It's very blurg. Over in DC, the only book I read was Green Lantern's number 10. I really enjoyed this issue. Our Phantom Lantern, our new villain, gets his ring, the Phantom Ring, which can channel any color in the emotional spectrum, and anyone can wear it. So think like a White Lantern ring, but for anybody, so you don't have to be worthy to use it. And then at the end, there's just a little kid who's super happy to know that even a girl can become a Green Lantern. So hooray, a nice, warm, fuzzy moment. I'm really surprised how much that I'm enjoying the series. I wonder if it's just too much 90s nostalgia, kind of has that feel. I guess it also feels clean, like they mentioned the Justice League, but I don't need to know anything about the Justice League book that they're in. I don't need to really know anything. I can just go in and read the comic book. I suggest Green Lanterns to you guys. It's, buddy cop sort of thing, but each of the characters are being developed pretty well. It's a good book. Indie book, and last one to review this week, The Walking Dead 160. The war continues. Stuff happens. That's really sort of it. That's kind of all I can say. Alexandria gets attacked, and everybody's responding to it. Robert Kirkman likes to take his time, and so you're seeing things as they happen. It's a 6-part series, this war. So it's still going. I say that like it's a bad thing. It's not a bad read. It's the middle episode. It's the middle episode of what's happening. So you're seeing the fight. You're seeing people die. There's nobody whose names I particularly know. And yeah, let's move on to something else, shall we? With a jump, pull list. Next week, all I've got is Hal Jordan and the GL Core 8 and Wonder Woman 10. And then I'm going to keep reading Revival on the Hoopla app. I am currently on volume 4. I am enjoying it so far. It's taking a couple little twists and turns, but the big picture still isn't quite there yet. And then I also started reading From Hell on Hoopla. I picked it up quite a while ago as sort of a Halloween read, and I was having some issues with it because there's pages that are just text, and that is really hard to read on an iPhone 5. Most of the panels, it seems, are actually pretty small, so I'm giving that a shot. And I also figured out how to read Hoopla on a regular desktop, which is just go to their website, and it'll also pull up the comics, and you can just read it on the web, which is sweet. Seriously, you guys, if you're not finding an app to go through your library stuff, do that. And my archive pick this time, a random pull from the shelf, is Earth X, which was kind of the Marvel version of Kingdom Come. So it's this sort of dystopian future where the Inhumans have released the Terrigen Mists around the world. So now literally everybody on the planet has some sort of ability or mutation. It is kind of a bleak read, sort of a bleak story, but very much like Kingdom Come. It seems like one of the main things is just how interesting it is to see what happens to everybody in the future and where everybody is. Unlike Kingdom Come, this one also has a lot of just reading, just sort of paragraphs explaining what they're up to, or this ongoing conversation between the Watcher and X23, Machine Man. Somebody help me out there. X51, X51. I will say that I don't know if I like Earth X as much as its sequels, but Earth X is sort of required reading to get there. It was followed by Universe X and Paradise X, which I thought were both very interesting in sort of the philosophy behind those comics. Look for this in trade. You might be able to get it through your library, which brings me to our topic of the week with a Doctor Strange. also known, I should totally like dub this over as an old radio show. Or I'll just fake it. Doctor Strange, also known as Stephen Vincent Strange, Sorcerer Supreme and Master of the Mystic Arts. Anyway, that's I like that. Our topic of the week is, who is Doctor Strange? So here's a little Comic Box 101 for you. Doctor Strange, as I said, Stephen Vincent Strange is his full story. He is the Sorcerer Supreme, Master of the Mystic Arts, originally called Master of Black Magic. First appeared in Strange Tales 110 in 1963. It was created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. In his comic book origin, he was born in 1930, so obviously this has been retconned since then. He is not that old. Boy, unless he is. We'll get into that in a second. He might be, still. In the comics, he was born in 1930 in Philadelphia, but grew up in Nebraska. There has been, obviously, plenty of retcons to his origin, which has said that he encountered magical happenings or, that the Ancient One was involved, we'll get to him in a second, with his life as he was growing up. But generally speaking, and I believe this is the way the movie is going to go, because it's, from what I'm reading, clearly a origin story. Sorry, Void. Is that Doctor Strange's origin story doesn't start until he's out of college. If you've seen the trailer, you basically get the gist, which is almost a shame, because if the trailer can explain his origin in just a couple of seconds, do we really need a movie to do that? In any case, here's the origin of Doctor Strange. Stephen Strange was a brilliant doctor, a neurosurgeon working at one of New York's top hospitals. Before the age of 30, he had already become one of the top doctors in his field, and he knew it. He was arrogant, self-centered, and very, very greedy. He only cared about money and being the best of the best of the best, but not to help people just because it pumped up his own ego. Then, in 1963, which is when the first story was published, so it's sort of accepted as the history. So Doctor Strange is 33 at this point. He gets into a car wreck, and it severely injures the nerves in his hands. So his hands are effectively sort of crippled. He can't move them as well. They cause him pain, and that basically ends his surgical career. He refuses to accept a consulting position or anything. He's like, no, this is the thing I do. This is my life, so it has to be this or nothing. He spends all of his money, his entire fortune gone, traveling the world, trying every legitimate or illegitimate way to repair his hands. Eventually, he hears rumors of a mystic in Tibet known as the Ancient One. So he pawns the last of his possessions in order to buy a ticket and head to Tibet. But once there, he finds the Ancient One, and then is frustrated to learn that the old man, and we're talking old, like 500 years old, Earth's first Sorcerer Supreme, the Ancient One, refuses to help. And then the Ancient One gets attacked by some sort of mystical force. And Strange eventually learns that that attack came from Baron Karl Mordo, one of the Ancient One's other pupils, or at this time, I guess, pupils. Doctor Strange isn't. I'm getting ahead of myself. He finds out the magical attack comes from a dude named Mordo, who is from Transylvania because, 1963. And Mordo has secretly been trying to kill the Ancient One while pretending to be his pupil. So Strange goes to warn the Ancient One, but Mordo puts a spell on him that keeps him from doing so. So the only thing Strange can do is act unselfishly for the first time in years, and he asks to become one of the Ancient One's disciples. In that way, he can gain his own abilities and act himself in order to keep Mordo from killing the Ancient One. Doctor Strange now is being trained over several years, so it's kind of a Batman-ish origin where he goes and travels to a temple in Tibet and then gets trained over the course of years by an old dude who may be immortal. Boy, that really sounds like Batman, doesn't it? But to be fair, that was Batman Begins. That was the movie, not in the comics. But still, so dude travels overseas and he learns the abilities. He learns how to tap into the mystical energies of the world around him as well as in himself. And then, in particular, invoke the power of 3 extremely powerful entities that exist outside of our dimension, known as the Principalities. And their names are Oshter, or Oshter, I don't know how to pronounce that, Hoggoth, and Agamotto, and that last one is important. We'll get to that. They're also known as the Vishanti. I should stick with my notes here. And during that time while he's studying, Mordo leaves to seek more power and be evil, and would eventually go on to become Doctor Strange's arch-villain, or one of his arch-villains, and appears to be possibly the arch-villain of this movie. Or it looks like they work together for a time, so maybe that's a spoiler and Mordo will become the villain at the end of the film, or we'll find out he's in charge, secretly behind the scenes at the end of the film. So I guess potential spoilers, but again, just like with Luke Cage, this is just what happened in the comics. And like Luke Cage, Doctor Strange has a variety of awesome catchphrases like, "By the Vishanti," or "By the Hoary Hosts of Hoggoth," because Stan Lee was writing the character, and Stan Lee loves him some alliteration. I want at least one mention of the Hoary Hosts of Hoggoth in this film, and I will smile. Look out for that, because if that's there, that is a big Easter egg just for fans of the comic. So now, all super trained and big magician guy, Strange leaves the Ancient One and heads to New York, where he lives in his sanctum sanctorum and is joined by Wong, who is a descendant of this incredibly old bloodline that has served the Ancient One for centuries. Wong becomes Strange's servant, as well as his friend. They do work together, but basically he's the butler, who also can do, kung fu and some magic on his own. And they have worked together ever since, sort of been partners. It does kind of feel like the man of mystery, on the radio, because he's like, here's your dude, and here's his sidekick who works with him as they go and solve crimes. Generally, Doctor Strange is regarded by the public as an occult scholar. He's not like some of the other superheroes. He's not a Captain America kind of figure where people see him as this big hero. Most of his stuff is dealing with other dimensional things and threats that nobody ever actually sees. Eventually, though, he does replace the Ancient One as our realm's Sorcerer Supreme, which might also be the plot of the film. The Ancient One dying, which, honestly, the Ancient One has died a couple of times in the comic books. What we're supposed to take away from this is that Doctor Strange, just like he rose in neurosurgery, he rose to become the Sorcerer Supreme in only a few years, while it took the Ancient One like hundreds of years to learn all of that magic. So he's a good learner. And really, that should be our takeaway, kids. Study hard. Learn magic. But that's it. That's basically the origin of Doctor Strange. But I have some other cool sort of notes of interest for you guys. First of all, Doctor Strange actually went through a superhero phase. If you go online and you search Doctor Strange costume or Doctor Strange superhero, there was a time where he had sort of a different costume where he actually wore a full face mask, and his costume was redesigned a bit to look more like a superhero spandex outfit. It didn't last. Normally, like his classic costume, if you will, from the comic books, is he's wearing just like a very loose, billowy shirt with the symbol thing on it that's sort of, it's not a cross, but kind of a cross looking thing on it. And then he just wears like pantyhose. It covers his feet. It's his pants. Not the world's greatest costume. Over time, it's been changed where his cape has been a robe instead, or in this most recent run when he's just out and about, he wears it as a scarf, and now he wears just like black pants and boots in the comic book. So they did update his look. He also used to wear bright yellow gloves, and now he no longer wears the gloves. I'm guessing the comic will probably shift a bit to be obviously more like the movie, because you want people to see the same character and recognize it and yada, yada, yada. Also, interesting of note, Doctor Strange was a founding member of the original Defenders, alongside the Hulk, Namor the Submariner, and the Silver Surfer. If none of those names sound familiar to you, or not names you associate with the Defenders, that is because the Netflix show is really just taking the name. They are not taking any of the other aspects, because the Defenders mostly faced supernatural threats. It was always an informal team, however, so people shifted in and out over the years, and there was all sorts of different characters. As far as powers go, it kind of just comes down to magic? ? Like, he can throw, bolts, make things happen and float, and, fairly Harry Potter-ish. Say the incantation, wave your fingers, and stuff happens. One of the ones that you see him using the most often is astral projection, where he leaves his body behind and he goes all ghosty and he goes out to investigate stuff. He is also, from what I have read, technically immortal, having passed a test against death itself as part of his training with the Ancient One. As far as his stuff goes, the different items, his most popular item by far is probably, well, it's probably a combination of his cape and then that amulet he wears around his neck. Now, it seems like in the MCU that's going to be one of the Infinity Stones. In the comics, it's known as the Eye of Agamotto, which I'm not sure if it's actually put as literally the eye of that being, but it was given to the Ancient One to protect our dimension from the Dread Dormammu, who is sort of this giant demon dude who rules a dimension just known as the Dark Dimension, who, from the latest trailers and commercials we've seen, might actually pop up in this Doctor Strange film, or at least we might get a glimpse of him. Another big Doctor Strange bad guy. Anyway, the Eye of Agamotto. So, in the comics, it is actually like a golden eye that opens up and you see an eye. It's not just an amulet shaped like an eye. And it will dispel illusions. It gives its wearer some psychic abilities, like it allows him to read people's minds or even partially mind control. He can summon images of the past. He can track people with it. It can emit like a beam of light that hurts evil beings or people corrupted by evil. It's basically your fix everything thing. It's his sonic screwdriver. I don't know Doctor Who super well, but that is my understanding of the Eye of Agamotto. It's basically his cure-all. Again, I don't think that's how it's going to go in the MCU. It sounds like it's an Infinity Stone, and it sounds like it might be the Time Stone. I really want to call it a gem, because that's how they refer to them in the comics. They're gems, not stones. I'm guessing it's the Time Gem because they've mentioned time a couple times in the trailers and the commercials and some of the posters and stuff like that. So I'm going to guess maybe it gives him the ability to control time in some case. Along with the Eye of Agamotto, the thing that it holds together is his big old cape, the Cloak of Levitation, with that big old sweet looking collar. He also has a big collar in the movie, but not to the extent that he does in the comics. And they have backed that off. I don't even think the cape has a collar anymore, if I remember right, in the current run. Well, actually, in the current run, the cape's been destroyed. But in any case, in the comic books, basically, just like it sounds, Cloak of Levitation, it lets you float, it lets you fly. You can ride it like a magic carpet. You can use it as a shield, or you can use it as a weapon by wrapping it around bad guys and people. And like I said, in this recent run, it can also become a scarf. It's not sentient, though, as far as I know. Like, it doesn't do these things on its own. You tell it what to do. But beyond that, it's just a big old cape that basically does what you want and lets you fly. So, pretty neat. Moving on. So there's two big books as far as Doctor Strange's library is concerned. Obviously, he has all sorts of magical tomes, but there's the Book of the Vishanti, which is the greatest known source of white magical knowledge. And then there's the Darkhold, which is basically, think of it as the big book of evil. I haven't read anything saying that either of these books are going to show up, but don't be surprised if that's an Easter egg, that somewhere in the story you see the Book of the Vishanti or the Book of the, or excuse me, the Darkhold. It's not the Book of, it's just the Darkhold, which just has a wonky symbol on it and in purple, I think. So don't be surprised if you see that on a bookshelf somewhere in the back. Another thing to look for. Let's talk the Ancient One very briefly. Ancient One, like I said, he's died a couple of times, but his whole thing is he's very Obi-Wan Kenobi. When the Ancient One, finger quotes, dies, he just lets his astral body stick around and basically becomes Ghost Obi-Wan Kenobi, giving advice and traveling around. Dormammu, I told you guys about already, the dark dimension that he rules, but there is another character related to Dormammu who I don't know if she shows up, but the only other person really outside of the Ancient One, Mordo, and Wong, and then there's Rachel McAdams' character, which we'll get to in a second, but the other one I would keep an eye out for is a woman named Clea, who was one of Doctor Strange's first students, and then was also his girlfriend for a time. They became lovers. In the comic books, we find out, and spoilers, again, this is comic book stuff, so who knows what they're doing in the movies, but spoilers, in the comics, you find out that Clea is in fact the niece of Dormammu, and originally came from that dark dimension. So she is technically heir to the throne of the dark dimension, and Doctor Strange doesn't know this when he finds her there and brings her back to Earth. She studies under him, eventually becomes his equal because of her own innate powers, and now, as far as I'm aware, she resides back in the Dark Dimension. She's the leader of a resistance trying to dethrone Dormammu and her mother, who is his sister. The actual female character they have in this one, played by Rachel McAdams, is a character named Christine Palmer, who you guys are going to dig this because she is known in the comics as, are you ready? Night Nurse. What? I know, your head is spinning. You're like, I thought Rosario Dawson was Night Nurse. And yeah, but keep in mind, if you've been listening to this podcast, that her character, Rosario Dawson's character, Claire Temple, was not originally one of the night nurses, and that her character is a mixture of characters from the comics. But there have been several different night nurses. Christine Palmer, really, she was in Night Nurse #1 in 1972, and then she's popped up here and there over the years. But there are multiple night nurses, so it'll be interesting to see what role Christine Palmer plays, because as far as I'm aware, she has never played a huge part in Doctor Strange's history. And that's it. That's your primer for Doctor Strange. I know that doesn't feel like a whole lot, but he has never been a character that has some of his own huge stories. The comic that I keep seeing popping up, and the one that Benedict Cumberbatch actually, and I'm trying to remember what Void's nickname for him was, and now I can't remember because I didn't write it down. Shoot. He's going to have to send me a text and remind me so we can talk about it when I do a big old review of Doctor Strange. There's even an image of Benedict Cumberbatch reading this book or buying this book in costume at a New York comic book shop, and that is Doctor Strange: The Oath. So if there's anything that you go out to read, check that out. They did also just release this week a comic called Sorcerer's Apprentice, I think. Doctor Strange: Sorcerer's Apprentice, which could serve as sort of a good primer for the character. It includes the origin story by Stan Lee and I think 2 other stories in it. So if you're looking for something just to kind of get a comic book idea of Doctor Strange, you could pick up that. Or like I said, see if you can find The Oath. I don't know if it's popular enough for libraries to have it, but you might be able to find it digitally. You might be able to find it on one of the Marvel subscription services, Marvel Unlimited, or you could just swing by your local comic book store and throw a few bucks their way. I'm sure they'd appreciate it. And that is it. It looks like this movie is going to be pretty by the numbers origin story, outside of the crazy special effects, obviously. But it seems like it's pretty much going to be hero gets powers, fight somebody who has very similar powers, wins. You know, the same thing we saw in Iron Man and the same thing we see in a lot of superhero movies. But guys, let's take a second just to appreciate this. Just like with Guardians of the Galaxy, Doctor Strange is a known character if you're a comic book fan, but a lot of people aren't huge fans. Like, Doctor Strange is not an incredibly popular character. So to see a live-action movie of him just means that Marvel has really built a steady place in Hollywood where now we can start seeing some more of these obscure characters come out. And that is so cool, you guys. I'm sorry, but that in itself is exciting enough to me. I am looking forward to seeing it. Looks like I'm going to go see it this weekend. I'm hoping to have somebody with me when I review it. Maybe Liam? Maybe? Anyway, that is Comic Box 101, Who is Doctor Strange? So we are going to close up that comic box with a bop doo doo ba da boom bop ba da bum 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 bum. That is it for this week. As always, you guys, star ratings and reviews on iTunes. I know I ask every week, but that is because that is the thing that keeps this podcast afloat and expand our Geek to Geek podcast network community. Speaking of, geektogeekcast.net, where you can sign up for updates for all of our other shows. Subreddit /r/geektogeekcast. We do have multiple shows, especially the Geek Fitness Health Hacks podcast that Beej is hosting, because he's getting very personal. There's some big things going on in his life, and he is carrying everybody along with him while supporting his own listeners. It's really good listening. So if Beej is listening, keep it up, buddy. I fully support you as you transition over to the freelance world, and I am listening, and I assume all of my listeners are listening too. If you want to talk to me directly, you can get to me on Twitter at Rob's Comic Box. I have a second Twitter account, which is at Noby, at KNOWBY, where I talk about things not related to comic books. You can also shoot me an email at thecomicboxpodcast@gmail.com. And that is it for this week, you guys. I hope everybody goes out and sees Doctor Strange so we can all talk about it on Twitter and on Reddit. With that, we will go. Bop-a-doo, dap-a-doo, dap-a-ba-da-dap-bop-dip-doo-ba-da-bop-a-doo-ba-doo, dap-a-ba-da-dap-bop, comic box. I guess I usually do the comic rings. Closing it up for the week. Ba-da-da-bop-bop-bop-bop-bop-doo, Doctor Strange, Comic Box 101. I hope you all enjoyed going to Doctor Strange School. Shibbity-boo. Shap-bop-ba-da-bow, ba-doom-bop-ba-da-dow. Seriously, you guys, at least once. The Hoary Hosts of Hoggoth. Oh, I love that alliteration. Thank you, Stan.